Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, and we're a little delayed tonight, but we're coming at you with another fantastic guest. And I do just want to do the usuals off the top here. I want to thank my last couple of guests, Tara Eveland. Great conversation we had last night. Really hoping to hear back from Steve Robinson about this story up in Maine about the Chinese grows. My designer, Brianna Woodward, Not a Damn Cheese Productions, Glenn Anderson from the Vermont Collective, the Zen Barn guys, Noah and Marlena, talking about that acquisition of the Curaleaf assets here in Vermont. And I do want to just announce a couple things I got coming up. I've got just a shitload of great guests coming at you on Tuesday. I've got Mark Cialdoni from Better Chem Consulting, another PhD chemist. I've got Miguel Lopez on Thursday from LB Farms. Miguel was on the show last year. On Saturday, Jason Struthers. I think you guys are going to want to hear about that story. But without further ado, we're just going to bring on the guest here because we'll wait for a minute. And I'm really psyched to have this conversation today. Let me see. Where's the goddamn button? There we go. It's Charles Stockstill. Charles, thank you for being here. And let me give a shameless slap, if you don't mind, the old man of the mountain. Charles, thanks for being here tonight, man.
Hello. I'm happy to be here, Caleb. I've been looking forward to doing this for a while now. So
cool. Before we do anything serious, and here I'm gonna slide you over there. But before we do anything serious, would you give us a 5-minute life story, please?
Oh yeah, sure. Let's see. Army brat. I've moved around a lot. First place we lived was in New York City, and then we moved to Colorado. I lived there most of my life. After bouncing around a little bit, went to military school, joined the military. Got out of the military at 27. Smoked my entire time in. Actually got a couple people to start smoking while I was in the Army, just because there were a lot of issues people had, and that was one of my best ways to deal with them. So I wanted to share that. Let's see. I met my first wife in Colorado like 2000-ish, right as I was just getting in the military. 2000, I was 17. That's when I joined. 2009, she passed away, and I had a 5-month-old daughter to take care of. So about the only thing I could think of was to grow cannabis. At that time, it still was pretty gray area. Medical was around, but not a lot of people were doing it, and not a lot of people could tell you how to do it right. So that led to my first time getting raided out of 3 times. Cannabis was pretty hard to deal with as far as what society put you through back in the day. It's gotten a lot better, so that's really nice. Let's see. I spent a lot of my time there in Colorado. Ended up getting robbed at some point. This was like 2013 for like 14 pounds. One of my buddies took or who I thought was my buddies, took a blackjack to the side of my face, sent my head through a glass table, and took everything I had. And like 6 or 7 guys were beating on me. I just stood up, walked out, and called my ride. About that time, the police showed up. So that's a whole nother crazy story. But that's what kind of got me out of.
Don't jump the gun too much, because that was on my list. I listened to that other podcast you sent me from Apartment 113 or those guys, and I had some follow-up questions. But yeah, carry on, sir.
Yeah. So that's kind of what got me out of Colorado and out of the cannabis culture for about 8 years. I went and ran a AAA company and got into horse training, and I absolutely loved it down in Texas while I was doing that. But AAA just ate me alive, and 7 days a week of being on call, running 2 different service stations. It was fun, but I didn't really have much to show for it at the end of it. After that, I moved up. Sorry?
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'll pick up when you leave off. Yep.
So at the end of that 8 years, I decided to get back into the cannabis industry. This is about 2020. So I moved to Oklahoma. Then the pandemic happens. Like within the same month, I moved to Oklahoma. And I had found a pretty large investor, and we had all this commercial property, and we were really getting cranking. So I got to build out 5 acres of an outdoor grow plus like a 40,000 square foot metal building that we had custom built. I got to outfit those for the first like 6 months of the pandemic all by myself because everybody else was locked up pretty much. So that was a lot of fun. I was the only guy on the road every morning. Gas was like $1. It was just absolutely insane being the cannabis guy during that time. But at that same time, I had worked into a job as the the fish husbandry director at this big aquarium at a mall. And so I was doing the aquarium stuff during the daytime, and then going and doing the cannabis stuff during the evening and the night times, or I mean daytimes. So it was fish husbandry during the most of the day, and then cannabis husbandry the rest of the day, and then take care of my daughter that who was with me and always has been from the beginning of all this. She's been around the cannabis industry more than anybody I know. It's absolutely insane. She from day one, 5 months old, she's been riding around the car with me making deliveries. So after the pandemic hit, I met my girlfriend right now, and she is just absolutely wonderful. We've been together since the beginning of the pandemic. We started traveling around the country together because she's a travel nurse. And so while everybody else was stuck at home, we were going through like Louisiana, Florida, Virginia, back to Oklahoma, Texas. It's just really all over the place, traveling with her 2 kids and my kid during the pandemic. It was absolutely legendary. We were having so much fun. We got to go to Disney World, Universal Studios when it would just had barely opened and nobody was there. So we really got to enjoy everything and fall in love at that. So it was really strange, but pretty cool. And then at the end of that, we kind of landed in Maine. Just all the places we've been, all the places that had different ways you could grow or smoke cannabis and how it was legal and just all the little ins and outs of it. Maine was super easy. You don't really have to look for good cannabis up here. It's literally everywhere. In every store, you find something that'll just is really freaking good. The laws are really lax up here for medical. It's a whole nother story. It reminds me of what Colorado was 30 years ago before it all got screwed up. Like 2006 when it originally got legalized out there, we had a really good caregiver program, and by 2012 that was gone. The caregiver couldn't have patients anymore, and it just destroyed what we had. And Maine still has that, so it's pretty cool. That's about the 5-minute story, I guess.
Okay, cool. I got a bunch of follow-ups, and the first one is going to be, I want to ask about your military experience, but before I forget, you said the Colorado caretaker program got messed up. Can I ask you about that first before I forget? And maybe if you have any ideas on how it got messed up or what went wrong.
Absolutely. They had a pretty good caregiver platform where you had for a while you could have unlimited patients, and those patients could sign over their rights for you to grow their cannabis, and that was 6 plants per person. Oh, there was a point in Colorado I had 220 patients as a caregiver, and I didn't need a storefront. I didn't need like a delivery license. I could legally grow their cannabis and deliver it to them anytime they wanted, and it was perfect. Then they started to slowly restrict the amount of patients that you could have. And that really drove up the number of caregivers and down the quality of service, because you could no longer be one caregiver for 500 people. You had to be, it was what they originally knocked it down to was 24 people or something like that. And then they kept knocking it down to like 8, and then 6, and then 0. They got rid of the caregiver model altogether. And that really just destroyed the entire industry from a mom and pop standpoint, because there was no way for us to climb the ladder successfully to get in. When I left Colorado, I had an edible company, a drink company, a cultivation company, a concentrate company. But when they got rid of that caretaker model, it would have cost me $85,000 to stay in business, just in a yearly licensing fee for all of those businesses. And there was no way I was going to do it. I could have afforded it, but I grew up legacy. I didn't want to pay for $85,000 of a shiny piece of paperwork saying I could do what I've already been doing, and that's helping people.
Hmm. So you said they got rid of the caretaker program altogether in Colorado.
Yeah, and this was when I left in 2013. I really haven't kept up on what they've been doing with it out there since. Even though Colorado's my home for a long time, it really left me jaded. And Colorado trying to take my daughter away twice over cannabis, just another reason that I really didn't like Colorado anymore. And it got so expensive there.
And I do want to slap. I got a couple comments here from Rodney Leinhardt. Some peace signs. Michigan is trying to get rid of caregivers. Also, Rodney says, and thanks for tuning in, Rodney. I appreciate the comments, man.
Yeah, they start getting rid of the caregivers, man. That's everywhere I've seen them do that in any state is kind of the beginning of the end. And it's so sad to see, because if we could just organize better as a community, we could stand up to them. But they've got more money and they know exactly where to go and what to do, and we need to start doing that ourselves.
And I want to dial back to your military experience, because I do have some notes in here about that topic as well that you just mentioned, but I want to say that for a little later. But I always love chopping it up with the veterans and hearing about sort of what they were doing in the military and how that's affected their lives. And I feel like a lot of the veterans I've spoke to have found cannabis sort of because of that experience. And I'd be curious to hear how that went for you, Charles.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Kind of a complicated thing with military cannabis with me. I started smoking when I was about 14 or 15. And that was about the time I started getting in a lot of trouble in public school. And my dad kicked me out, or pulled me out of school, and took me to New Mexico Military Institute and dropped me off and left. That was a really good thing for me. I didn't realize it at the time. But, that was kind of linked to all the, what's the word I'm looking for? Not distrust, but I was doing a lot of things behind my family's back to just try and get out of the situations I wasn't happy in, trying to get away from school, hanging out with the wrong people. And I was falling into the crowd with not just cannabis, but a lot of other drugs as well. And it wasn't a good place for 14-year-old to be. And so I went to military school, and I still found cannabis there. I still found people that were using it, and I really wanted to self-medicate because I was pretty angry and upset and full of anxiety, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Nobody would let me go to therapy. Nobody would let me have any medication for any of my conditions that I had or am going through at that time or still dealing with. Fast forward a few years, and I'm now 17, getting really good grades, and it's not enough for my family at that point. And I'm just like, I'm tired of it. So I didn't want to run away. I wanted to leave and be able to succeed somewhere. And the only way I could do that was to join the military. So off I went. I joined, what was it, like 2000. And so this is before everything happened, the war on terror and all that. So I joined, and then while I'm in, I go through basic, and I get done with that and go home for about a month. It was a split training option. Then I go back to school, and that's when September 11th happened. So I joined in peacetime, and while I was going to school, we were at war. So that was a pretty big change in my lifestyle, my mentality, why I was there, what I was doing, and it completely changed who I was and who I was going to be. My battle buddy in school was actually on sabbatical from the World Towers, the World Trade Center. He worked on like the 63rd floor. He knew everybody in there. He had all these stories, and he was just devastated. And, this was my battle buddy who I spent all my time with, next to in formation, running all these gauntlet challenges, sleeping with, eating. We were always together. His name was Bill. Pretty awesome guy. I haven't talked to him in a few years, but he's still around, doing pretty good. but he was like this major banker, and he went to join the Army for a break so that he didn't have to think anymore. It just blew me away. But we went through all this together, and when I got done with all my training, we were at war, and all my friends were going across the sea to their different missions, and here I am in communications, and I'd gotten all these really good scores. I was in charge of crypto communication, and so they kept sending all my buddies over there and keeping me back so that I could teach the next round how to splice fiber optic cable, as it were. That was pretty much the long and short of it, that not too many people back then could do what I did, because fiber optic was still pretty new, and there weren't a lot of people trained in it, not even in the civilian world. And so after, I got back home and I got my station and all that, and it just kept keeping me home. And inside, it felt good to be home, but at the same time, I hated that all my buddies got to go over there and do what we were all trained to do, and that was to fight for our interests, whatever those may have been at that time. But that's for a whole nother discussion. And
Yeah.
so, there was a point where I'm on like 2 years standby. I didn't know if I'm going to get shipped out or not. And I like every 24 hours after, I get a phone call and a code, whether or not I'm leaving. And it was so stressful, because I'd just rather go and get it over with rather than worry the whole time about when I'm going, if I'm going, and do I grab my go bag now or tomorrow or next week, or what are we doing here? And so 2004 came along, and I'm like, all right, I finally get to get out of the military. I've been in the military since I was 14, basically. And it wasn't really ever a place I wanted to be. It was just a place I needed to be. And so I'm like, I finally get to live my life. I finally out of the military. What am I going to do? I get to start a family. And then I get a letter from the White House, basically. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was very official. It had the cross and the eagle on there and all that. And I opened it up, and it's a letter from President Bush. And he's it's basically what it's called is a stop of leave. And he told me that I could either re-sign my military contract for another 4 years with 2 years standby, or he would choose for me. It was at that point I was like, well, I'm kind of drafted at this point. I didn't know we still did that. And I talked to all my commanding officers, and they explained it that my training cost $1.3 million, and they weren't ready to let me go. I said, oh, okay. That really sucked. So I just kept doing what I was doing. I didn't want to go pick another job or whatever, anything. I felt pretty safe with what I had. And ultimately, that turned out to be a pretty good idea. Nothing really changed the rest of the 4 years I was in the military. They just kept making me teach and show up. And then 2008 rolled around, and they said, well, Mr. Stockstill, we really don't want to let you go, but if you're going to stay with your military career, you have to go retrain and find a new career, because your career does not exist in the Army anymore. I said, oh, bye. I got out of there so freaking quick, never looked back. Within like 6 months, I had my daughter. Me and my wife had been together since like 2002 at this point. And so I finally decided, well, let's have a family. We moved down to Castle Rock, Colorado from Fort Collins, Colorado, and things were going really good. I went for a job interview one day and came back, and she was in intensive care. And 3 days later, she had passed away from a blood disease. It was her white blood cells had turned against her red blood cells, like super rare, and nobody really understood why. And that was it. And so here I am, just pretty much fresh out of the military. Don't really know what else to do with my life. Know I can grow flowers and vegetables, and I know how to take care of my family if I had to, like feeding wise. Well, let's try growing cannabis. And I'd already grown a little bit of it here and there, but that was my first time when I really hit it hard and found out I was freaking awesome. And I think it was the dedication of being a single dad, trying to take care of my daughter, and just throwing myself at the plant trying to hide from my loss. And it helped me, but at the same time, I didn't like confront that for years. All I did was just grow, sell, innovate, and just throw myself at it 100% until I got robbed. And then that kind of woke me up, and this wasn't really what I wanted for my life, my children. I didn't want to be in that drama and be worried all the time, because at that time, there was still, even now, there's still a lot of stigma against our community. It can make things difficult, especially when you're raising children, especially when you're the only person that child has to depend on. If anything happens to you legally, what's going to happen to them? So it puts you in that fighter stance against the city, the government, the sheriff, the police. You have to be ready for it because you know it's going to come. And that's just where I've been since, I guess. And it's put me in pretty interesting situations and helped me fight for what's right with our community and to keep this plant as free as possible.
And I want to slap a couple comments. Charles, Rodney's going to take a dab right now in your honor.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for your service. And this is from Luke Williams at Muerte.
Thanks, guys. It's always hard to talk about that shit. It brings up a lot of, there's a lot of PTSD involved with, military careers, a lot of when you lose somebody in any way, shape, or form, let alone suddenly. And so it's taken me a lot of work to be able to talk about these things in this way. And cannabis has helped me with that. Ketamine therapy has helped me with that.
Oh,
I didn't realize, that was helping me at the time. I went through ketamine. I went through mushrooms. I went through just about every drug on the books, to be honest, even man-made ones, while I was trying to learn how to self-medicate. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. I thought I was just getting high at the time. But really, my self-driving force was to find some sort of sense of calm in my life, some sort of peace, some sense of relief. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing. Any addict out there is really just trying to put together pieces of their life and deal with it in the best way that they know how, which, they haven't always been taught. I wasn't taught the right way to deal with things, or how to get through things, or what things were okay, even though nobody taught me it was okay to not be okay. And that really fucked with me for a long time. And cannabis and mushrooms and ketamine, they all really helped with that. And looking back on that now through the revolution that we're experiencing is just really opening my own journey up that I never even realized I was going through. And it's something pretty neat. And I'm happy that the younger generation is starting to experience this, and they don't have to deal with the same stigma that we did.
And you did say, I think on the phone, that maybe you were a bit of a black sheep in your family, but then you also told me that you think you reversed your mother's Alzheimer's, which was a fucking weird dichotomy, because I've seen sort of the same thing in my family, where I got to give my grandma edibles before she died, and it was great. She ate a bunch of food, and she got up out of her chair for the last time in her life. And some of those things to me were the most powerful moments in my life, at least in relation to dealing with my family. And I'd like to hear how that kind of went throughout the course of your life.
That was one of the most intense things that's happened to me as an adult. Me and my mom have been off and on really good relationship, throughout my life. She's been diagnosed manic depressive or bipolar on the severe scale ever since I was a kid. So that's something I've had to watch and grow up and see. Her mood swings, her depression, her trying to live her life the best that she can with what she's got going on. And she's always been pretty darn mean, to be perfectly honest. She's my mom. I love to honor her, but man, she could be mean. So we've been talking, and this was about 2 years ago. We talk about every once a week, once a month, whatever we can. And she says she really needs to come out and see me. She's not doing so good at her apartment. she keeps falling back into her alcoholism and then falling and then ending up in the hospital. And she's like 70 years old. This is not a good place for an old lady to keep cycling into with this kind of thing. And this is something we've always had to kind of deal with, is her bipolarness and her self-medication with alcohol and cannabis. But that was always a good thing for her. That always evened her out. You know, as long as we got mom her joint, you know, things were probably going to be okay that day. And you know, she called me, and I can tell she really, you know, something's up. She kind of needs to see her family, and she doesn't like fly across the country very often to see us, or likewise. But she flew out to Maine from Colorado, and she showed up in a wheelchair, and I didn't know anything about a wheelchair. You know, she's always been, that generation is really quiet about their medical needs. It seems like they don't really talk about stuff. And so she shows up in a wheelchair, and she can't really walk. And I'm like, oh, what's going on, Mom? You didn't tell me none of this stuff is going on. And you know, through the first course of 2-3 days when she shows up, it's dawning on me that my mother now needs full care. She's got diapers on. She can't walk. She doesn't have a walker anymore. And then at night, she doesn't know who I am. And you know, we're all starting to put this together. My girlfriend Catherine, she's a ER nurse and works in ICU, does all sorts of amazing things. So she's there helping me through this process, because she knows right away what's going on. Thank God
That's
that she was
nice.
here and involved in our life.
Yeah, dude, that must have been nice to have.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm learning how to take full care of an adult, which I've never done before. And if any of y'all have had to do that, it is a pure act of love. There's nothing else about it. You were there taking care of your parents the way they took care of you as a baby. And so we would learn. I get on the same page as her caseworker in Colorado, and I start talking to doctors and her, and you know, getting very involved with her life. And Catherine finds out that she's on like 3 different diarrhea pills, a whole bunch of other medications that are conflicting with each other, and nobody's really been paying attention to my mom, including me. And I'm devastated at this point, because I thought she'd been doing okay from what she's been telling me in the phone calls, but when you see her in person, that's not what's happening. So we get her off of all these bad medications and line them out correctly. You know, what time of day is supposed to be taken with food. We get her scheduled down, get things fixed. Then we get involved with our friend at Old School Farms, Hillary and Brett Lunscombe. You might know of them. They do some excellent work shrinking tumors for children with St. Mary's, and Dr. Uma, and they're amazing people. They dedicate their lives to the plant, and they're out on their little hilltop in their yurt, always making RSO for kids and changing lives, and they do it for free. It's absolutely amazing, the heart on these people. So they did this for my mom. You know, we've already been working with them at this point, but now my family, now I need something. And I'm like, I don't know how to go about asking for help, because I never really had to do it. And so we get her on this RSO regimen. And I say that there within a week, her sundowning stops. At night, she stops doing that. She doesn't have this. She doesn't from hospice. She knows who her family is. She knows who she is. She knows where she is, when she is, and it stopped it in its track. She's still on that pretty hard. Now she's in assisted care, this really cool place where it's like a whole bunch of old hippies, and they get to go out to the gazebo and smoke and tell stories, and it's the best place that she could possibly be right now, other than with her own family. And you know, I'm trying to raise 3 kids at this point in time and take care of mom, so I'm really happy that she's doing well where she is, because that was very stressful for me. And you know, she knows where she is, what she is, and who we all are still, and it's all because of that full extract cannabis oil. And I you know, I've always walked the walk, but that really made me talk. Like, I guess I've always talked about how plants can change people's lives, but I've been pretty blessed medically, and so has my family. We haven't really needed it. But to see that change in her and what it could do, it blew me away. And I've been involved in this my whole life. And to see that, what it could do for my mother in that situation and help her brain function better, was just mind-boggling. Because my whole life, you know, I've been stigmatized that, you know, pot is bad, you're a pothead, you're bad, you can't think, you're lazy, so on and so forth, just all that stuff. And the more we learn how to properly manage this plant, the better it's getting for everybody. And, alcohol is going down, cannabis is going up, families are sticking together, mental health is, I'd like to think, getting better because of it, but it's not some short road.
Mm. And I gotta get that mic turned back up. There we go. Yeah. And that's how I felt too, that giving my grandma edibles was really a powerful moment for my family, I thought. And it worked way better than I ever imagined it. I knew it was going to work, but I didn't know it was going to work that well. And, if we had some RFO, maybe it would have been a different story, but, I want to keep this moving because we could talk about that one for 2 fucking hours, Charles. But I do want to, I want to rewind a little when you talked about getting raided, because I've talked to a lot of folks who have dealt with the police. My dad was arrested in this big bust back in 1991, which really was a little PTSD for me. But getting raided has got to be tough on you. And I'd be curious. It sounded like from the interview I listened to on that other podcast, maybe you thought one of your friends ratted on you, which also must be super hard. And
I know for a fact one ratted on me. I know exactly who it was, and that was later confirmed. But that guy was facing quite a large sentence, and I kind of understand what he did because he had to give me up or spend pretty much lifetime in jail. So I can be mad at him, but it is what it is, I guess. So the first time I got raided was 2006. I'm on like my third cycle in this room. I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I've got 27 seedlings going right now, and I'm proud of them. It's not too many people are really loud and proud about growing medical at this point in time. I didn't have my license or anything, but we figured we were probably safe because everything was coming down the pike, and we knew other people that were doing it. Nobody was too worried at this point. But I was being a little too loud and to the wrong people that had gotten in trouble for dealing amphetamines. And so these amphetamine dealers knew about my grow, and they narked me out to the police when they got caught, thinking that I would save them some time. So it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. We're watching some movies, me and my wife at this point. And I'm like, who the fuck is here? And it's not really an aggressive knock or anything. And I go around the edge wall to the door, and there's like 6 fucking sheriffs standing there. I'm like, oh! And I cracked the door a little bit. I'm like, can I help you, gentlemen? And they're like, yes, Mr. Charles Stockstill, we know you have 27 plants inside, and we're here to confiscate those from you tonight. I'm like, oh, really? Hold on a second. Like me and my wife were like, this is like a Friday night. We got our party mode on. There's all sorts of shit happening on the table, like more than just cannabis. We're like, oh shit, not good, not fucking good. So we tell the cops we've got a whole bunch of sex toys out. That's the only thing I could think of at this point. We didn't have any shit out, but that's what we told them. We're like, we got to put away all our sex toys. So we run inside. We fucking start flushing all our drugs. Fucking hiding shit. Fucking just. It was crazy. We were running around like 2 crazy people. I couldn't believe they let us do this. But they didn't have a warrant. They just wanted to come inside. They knew the exact number of my plants. And I was like, oh, fuck. I already know the exact number. I'm kind of screwed here.
That was a question from Rodney. Did they have a warrant, though? But thanks for,
No, they did not have a warrant, but they knew like everything else. So they're like, I was like, well, I'm not going to let you in without a warrant. They're like, well, we can go get one, but it's going to be a lot worse because we already know everything. And like earlier that day, we'd gotten a phone call from my wife's parents saying that the cops were up there looking for us. And we're like, why the fuck are they up there looking for us? And then he's like, they tried to say it was something that you missed court for, but I think they're trying to bust you for weed. And her dad's this old fucking hippie. He ain't around no more, but he knew what was up. He knew exactly what was fucking going down. He was trying to let me know while they were standing there without saying too much. And so we didn't realize that until way after the fact. So we finally like, all right, come the fuck in, and they sit down, they talk to us, they explain the whole situation. They've had somebody in our house, they know this number of plants, they know what room they are, they want me to be honest about it. And I'm like, all right. But this whole time that's happening, just so the rest of you all know, I'm like 6'8". I am not a small guy. I was in the military for a reason. I'm a soldier. I'm a big guy. You don't want to encounter me on the battlefield. And they brought this guy that was like everybody loved Raymond's brother. He's like 7'5", like 275 pounds, all muscle, like 35 years old. Like this guy's in his peak of being an officer, and he's a DEA officer. And he was on some other different unit. He told me they brought him in special that night just for me. And I was like, oh, little old me, huh? They're like, yeah, if you decided to run, they were going to send me after you. I was like, oh, yeah, I ain't running from your big ass. I ain't running anyway. But that they brought that guy there for me was rather intimidating. I was like, oh, y'all had this whole situation planned out. Y'all know that I ain't no mean guy then either. And they're like, yeah, we understand that. And so within like 2 hours go by, they searched my entire fucking house, except my crawl space where we threw all the shit we didn't want them finding. That was on our coffee table. We threw that down the crawl space, clothes over it. And they looked down there, but they never went down there. They kind of let that be, I think, for whatever the reason. So they took all my lights, all my plants, and they took my over and under shotgun, which was in a different room. It wasn't even for protecting the cannabis. It was just because I like going bird hunting. And they knew that. And they're like, well, we got to take it because in Colorado, you can't have guns and medical license. And I was like, I don't even have medical license right now. And they're like, we know, that's why we taking your shit. So I'm freaking out. All my shit's gone. My shotgun that my dad gave me is gone. I've been thieved by the boys in blue at this point, just like most of us have been at some point, by the largest gang out there. But what was weird is how cool they were about it. I was just honest with them. They were honest with me. And that's the biggest advice I got about anybody who's raided. If you're getting raided, they know what the fuck is up. Keep your mouth shut, but, don't be a dick about it because, they're just there doing their job. If you make it easy for them, they'll make it easy for you and you'll get out of there a lot sooner.
Well, that's my problem is that I run my mouth.
Me too. I'm going to talk some shit.
Here's Rodney again. He said, oh, hell, whether they know something or not, no warrant, no entry, period. And Rodney, I agree with you, but,
I would agree with you, but when you get to the end of this story, you'll see why I don't always agree with that statement and that way of handling things.
And sometimes.
Yes, they took my shit. Yes, they uprooted my plans. But I was in the wrong. I didn't have a license.
Yeah.
No, so they had every right to do what they were doing, and I had a shotgun. So, as far as from their point of view as police, they were doing their job. This was at the very beginning of the industry, and so they're shitting themselves as much as I am. They're like, "Are we busting this guy properly?" So the next day, I called the only lawyer in High Times for Colorado. His name Robert Corey. He's still a pretty famous motherfucker. He's helped a lot of people. He cost me $10,000 in a retainer. I don't know how the fuck I pulled that off. Pulled it by my hair, my chinny chin somehow, and gave it to the man within a week. He made one phone call to the Douglas County Sheriff's Department in Fort Collins, Colorado, and they gave me everything back. All he told me was to go get my license, which I did within a couple days. Went and got my medical license, and they gave me everything back. Dropped all the charges. So that's my story of my first raid. I couldn't believe that they knew everything and they gave me a chance to do the right thing. I don't think if I had been a minority of any way, shape, or form, that would have happened. It was one of those privileged moments, and it was bullshit. The way it happened, the way they did it, it was a shakedown. It was they were going after my shit. They thought I had more. They thought the plants were more developed. You should have seen the look on their faces when they realized that they were like 6-inch seedlings in every one of these fucking pots. I was laughing my ass off about that part because in Colorado, unless it has a taproot over 12 inches, it's not considered a fucking plant. So they had nothing on me, absolutely nothing. So that the first time.
And you got your shit back.
The second time,
they gave you your gun back, and
yeah, they gave me my gun back. They gave me my lights back.
Okay. Yep. So, and the second time, yeah, go ahead.
The second time, I'm down in, Colorado. That's where I grew up. It used to be called unincorporated Inglewood, We call it Inglehood just because we thought we were kind of like California, but not even close. We were just suburbia white boys that were in the game. No, it's pretty funny thinking that we were just a bunch of posers back in the day. Almost like the Island Boys in a way. So yeah, just absolutely insane. But anyway, I'm into brewing beer. You know, I brew cannabis beer, and I got some pretty awesome recipes. So I had this huge bag of yeast, and it looked like about a kilo of cocaine. And me and my buddies are laughing when we go to this beer store. We buy some supplies. We're getting ready to make this big brew of beer, and we're coming out, and we're throwing around this big fucking kilo that looks like cocaine back and forth while we're going into my house that day. Like, oh, we got this. You know, we're just like, hey, look what we got. We're showing it around, whatnot. Apparently, my neighbor, who was a kindergarten teacher, called the police on us, thinking that that was a big bag of cocaine. And in that hour that I'd been home, I had pinned it to my pin board where you just keep all your post-it boards and stuff like that. I pinned it up there for the recipe because we were getting ready to make it. And well, here come 3 sheriffs knocking on my door. Dunk, dunk, dunk. I've got a pretty big grow going in my house at this time, and they know this at this point. We're already like first name basis. And so I'm like, yeah, what's going on, Officer Phil? Let's go. You know, come inside. I show him all my paperwork and everything. And he was like, you know, Charles, I'm not here for your weed today at all. I already know what you got growing downstairs. I already know you got like about 10 pounds in the house. You got all the paperwork accounted for. I'm like, all right, then why are you here? And he's like, your neighbor said that you had some fucking white powder out in the front yard that you were swinging around, and we needed to come check that out. So I point like right over to the board. I'm like, you mean that big bag of white powder right there? And he's like, yeah, that could be it. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I brought home about an hour ago. It's yeast for beer. And he got a pretty good chuckle out of that. He tested it, and I'm like, yeah, it's yeast, dude. And so, you know, we're just hanging out for a minute. He ends up leaving. And no, that was that. That was the long and the short of it. Me and my friends go back outside with our bag of so-called cocaine, and we are showing it off again, saying, we still have it. The cops left. Ha, 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 ha. So it was we were trying to get as much fun out of it as we could, just because neighbors were being nosy fuckers. The third time, this one took me for a fucking loop. I kicked my mom out of the house because of her alcoholism, and I was taking care of my 14-year-old little brother. They were living with us. And this was about 20 years before she got Alzheimer's and all that stuff. So she moves out, takes my little brother with her, but she's just like drunk off her ass. My girlfriend at the time was pretty concerned, so she was calling the police on her and getting her arrested because she's trying to drive 60 miles away with a 14-year-old while she's really drunk. We're concerned for her safety at this point. So she ends up coming back home with him, and he stays with us for a while, and then Child Protective Services get involved. The first night they come over, I've got a pipe sitting on my table, my coffee table. Don't do that. That totally screwed me over. They got me involved with the CPS. And so they filed a report against me that night after they had talked to my mom about my brother's situation. I thought everything was all good. I'd never dealt with CPS before. They are scary. They got a lot of power. And so they come back. Like Wednesday of that week, and they're like, all right, we found that you have been using cannabis and your children because the caseworker came over and found the pipe on the table, and the children were in the same room when this had happened. So now they start to investigate my whole caregiver life. You know, it's pretty much centered around cannabis while I'm trying to raise the children, of which they don't like at all. Like, you can tell that they are not liking this. The sheriffs that she brought with her, the intake caseworker, they are very uncomfortable that the child is in this cannabis situation at all whatsoever, let alone with a widower. And yeah.
Did you say they brought sheriffs with them?
Yeah, they do. They usually, if they are coming in on some sort of wellness check, it's not rare for them to bring the sheriff with them, especially if it's some sort of drugs are involved.
And you said this was because of a pipe?
Yeah, this was because of pipe left on the table.
Paraphernalia.
Yep. And so there's another side of the story that I don't tell most times, but I'm going to let it out this time. I'm pretty much a fucking tweaker. pretty hardcore at this time because I'm making a lot of money and I didn't know what to do with it. So I started partying all the time. I got involved with meth pretty badly. Well, what I thought was badly. For me, it was. I was constantly using it, but I was using less than a gram a week. And once I went through therapy and everything, I found out people are using a lot more than that. So anyway, I digress. That day, they ended up not being able to prove anything, couldn't take my daughter out of the situation until they took me outside and searched me. Then they found a amphetamine pipe on my person. And then they took me back inside. Then they planted about 8 grams of amphetamine in my DVD case and pulled that out and arrested me on the spot for that because that's the only thing they could get me on that day. And they knew the situation was fucked. They knew they could tell I was a tweaker. They could tell I wasn't was not taking care of my daughter the way that I should.
Wow.
And so they removed her that day and took her over to grandparents' house about 10 blocks away. And that was the first time I ended up getting some help that I needed for therapy with grief, loss from my wife passing away. Now the addictions that I was facing, the dependencies that I had walked myself into to try to deal with this stuff. And it just started to really disintegrate my life. And I was lucky that this happened when it did, to be perfectly honest. So, I know it really put me on the path I needed to be on to change my life and really focus on cannabis. And so I kind of forgot where I was going because this has always been a hard thing for me to talk about. It's something I always took me a long time to forgive myself for. I'm still pretty hard on myself about that whole situation and what I put my family through. But I use that story now to try and help people to get through what they're going through.
And thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. If I can get off it, anybody can.
Yeah, I got a shameless slap here. Charles Stockstill, the old man of the mountain. And I meant to throw that up every 10 or 15 minutes, but you got me distracted there with great stories. Yeah. And I know that shit's not easy to talk about. And I do thank you for sharing. But I would like to keep this moving because, boy, that was only 3 of the notes I had from our phone call. So,
well, let's move on to something else. So that's kind of the long and short of it. I ended up fighting him for like 9 months, got my daughter back, got my grow back. The only thing they ended up making me do was put locks on my basement door so that she couldn't get to the grow anymore. And that was what made them happy eventually. But man, going to the court and just going through all the different therapies and being forced to learn myself was an experience, to say the least. Not both. It was hard, easy, everything in between.
I think I'm still working on that shit for myself as well. So, yep.
We all are.
Confirm.
Part of the human condition. I'm just trying to get better every day.
Word up. The topic I was really curious to talk to you about is the history of, I saw Charles the Hashishin, and really like that was the first time I ever saw that word. I've dealt with a lot of hash stuff, obviously, with my dad getting busted in this big hash deal, but I had never heard that phrase or that word until I don't know, like last year. And it seems like I saw some of your posts on LinkedIn, and I was curious if you'd give us maybe a little history lesson here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me stand on the shoulders of giants for a second. I wouldn't have known any about this if it weren't for Frenchy Cannoli. Back in 2009, when I first started to get into the cannabis industry, my friend at the time found his videos in French and had one of her friends translate them to English so that I could learn how to make bubble hash. And this was before anybody else was doing it, man. Like anybody else, like Frenchy wasn't even over here yet. This was just something that was being talked about in very small circles. And I started learning about Haitians. And then I remembered I heard about them in the Tales of Marco Polo and different things I'd heard about on the Silk Road. So that kind of started my initial search for where Hashishans had come from. They originally had started as the original assassins back in like it's like 1200s or the 1400s. Somewhere in there is when the Order of Hashish was started, and they were an Ismaili Muslim sect called the Navazi. I know I'm butchering this horribly right now, and I'm so sorry for my Muslim friends. I try really hard on this stuff, but a specific sect of Muslims in the Middle East, near Castle Amulet. I'm not getting my geography very good right now. Something I'll look up for you and get back to with you on later, Caleb. So
I'm not going to hold your feet. I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire on all this shit. As long as you're in the right ballpark, we're going to be good. Yeah.
So these group of hashish eaters, Hashishans, were talked about in their native language as the Hashishans. But part of what this group also did was to change the minds of different government leaders to try and get them to leave their specific sect alone so that they could have peace in their area of the world. Or there's other stories that, you know, these were like the original puppet masters behind the puppets, world leaders pulling the strings like the world order is nowadays, kind of a thing. You know, they were the order of hashish eaters. And that became over years the order of assassins. So the term assassin actually means hashish eater. And that was a very derogatory term back then, just as much as being a pothead is now. That was something that other people used to describe us as hashish eaters. We were assassins. We were people of ill repute. We would rob, steal, kill. And one of these stories, there's a lot of these stories, and they center around this character called the Old Man of the Mountain, who is, I know his name. It'll come to me in a second. Give me a little bit. So the Old Man of the Mountain is how his enemies would talk about him. The Old Man of the Mountain is out there. You gotta be careful. If you go out there into the Old Man of the Mountain will get you and he will kill you, or he will make you do things that you don't want to do. And there were stories that he would recruit young men and bring them to his castle, his paradise, where there would be all sorts of food, drugs, women, everything that, a young man could possibly want at this time in his life, and he would give him a small taste of this paradise. And then he'd be like, all right, well, you need to go do these missions for me. Whether you need to go assassinate somebody, influence this government, whatever it was, that you need to go do this, and I'll let you back in paradise. And the story goes that he almost never would let anybody back. But this is something that his enemies said. There's a lot of different stories of a different point of view. From their point of view, they were just trying to preserve their religion.
It sounds like a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
Damn.
And so the story of people threatening this sect, and the leader of that other sect that threatened the Naziri waking up or going into his bedroom or waking up. There's a couple different versions of it, with a knife on his pillow. So he wakes up, boom, there's a knife on his pillow. He has the best guards in the world, and these assassins were still able to get to him to leave a message on his pillow and saying, don't mess with us or we're going to kill you. And there's other stories of them passing these other leaders along the road and just swarming them with 4 or 5 assassins and killing that person to enact what change they want in the government. And so for hundreds of years, governments in the Middle East were very feared of the assassins, the order of the hashish eaters, because if they did anything they didn't like or that other people wanted done, these assassins would come to make sure that was done. And if you didn't do what they wanted to do, they would kill you. That was just as simple as it was. And there's a lot of legend, a lot of stories around this individual. A lot of Western people say that his stories aren't even true. But you go back into like really Middle East culture, there's a lot to it, and that person existed.
And
And that term
I've seen
assassin
I've
feeder
seen
is something that I tried to go ahead. Sorry.
no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just saying I've been looking into this a lot because I saw what you posted
No.
about, and it seems like, in my opinion, there's a lot of validity to some of these stories.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
So this whole order, this whole protecting our sect, protecting what we think is ours, trying to enforce what we believe should surround our culture, our community. That is why I started the Old Men of the Mountain, almost like an Arthurian round table of assassins, of hashish eaters, striving to make the best of what we can for our community. And it was all inspired by Frenchie. Frenchie's basically part of my logo. Whenever from his trips over to Morocco, and the Pashtun hats that they wear in Pakistan, the real history of the Silk Road, really trying to touch and bring forth to our generation and the next generation so that they can understand the history and the stigma that hash has always had. And still has to this day. In every state, hash carries a significantly stronger sentence if you're caught with it versus cannabis seeds. If you're caught with hashish, it like Texas, every gram is a felony. Even in Maine, if you're a recreational person, you're only allowed to carry 5 grams of hash or concentrate on you. Where are these ancient laws coming from? Where's there these ancient stigmas coming from? It's wrong.
You said a gram of hash in Texas is a felony?
Yeah. And so every cartridge that you have in Texas is a felony of THC.
Wow. Like a
And I used to
distillate cart.
put down there. I would get ripped off by people making these fucked up cartridges, so I just made my own. And there were times when I'm sitting there looking at 5,000 felonies on my bookshelf. It's absolutely insane.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, to develop this culture forward that we need with the assassins, the hashish eaters, the stigma's still out there. They're still against us for the best part of the plant. That the hash is the magic of the plant. That's the final expression. You're pulling off that little trichrome and you're collecting it with all its sisters and putting that into a nice resin clump. You've removed all the plant matter. You've taken out all the bullshit. You've got what's left is what really does what people want from the plant, whether that they just want to get high, whether they want to medicate, whether they want to physically get better. That's all coming from that trichrome. There's a lot to be said about full extract cannabis oil, but that magic is in that trichrome. There's a lot of magic in the roots of the plant. There's magic in the fiber. It all serves different purposes. But why do we have the strongest laws against what's the most effective medicine? I think we all know that answer. And it's just to keep pharmaceuticals where they're at.
Well, and that was a point you made on the phone. I guess we could transition to that now, but I believe you called it the corporatization of cannabis or something to that effect. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Certainly something I've looked at a lot is the presence of these True Leaf type of Cure Leaf, different companies like this that seem to
So don't get me started on Cure Leaf. That's a whole nother story. I very much dislike Cure Leaf and where their money is going.
Yeah, go ahead.
We all have some gripe against MSOs, but as far as all of Cure Leaf's money being involved with the Russian oligarch and that always just being super shady, and they always have these different announcements about him and saying, oh, it's okay because he does things this way, and then there's other news that he does things this way, and it's always just back and forth. And when there's that much drama around somebody, something's not right, and we don't need those players in the cannabis market. And it's sad because they're the number one in the world, the largest. They are the one driving what we are all experiencing in these states. Maine actually absolutely does not like them on a caregiver level because they've tried to get rid of the home grow here. They try to get rid of the home grow in New Mexico. They really lobby against mom and pop organizations. And, while it sucks, that's what capitalism is. And they're doing it to the number one best extent that capitalism will allow it. And we need to organize. We really need to start fighting people like that. And, there's some places out there doing it, but we're still just so divided as a community, worried about how this person is an operator, how that person is an operator, what they do, who they spend their money on, this, that, and the other thing. And it's just keeping us divided, and the big corporations are winning. If we don't pay attention to history, we are doomed to repeat it. We can look at this as a very strong similarity between the tobacco industry in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. Back then, there were, every farmer grew hemp, every farmer grew tobacco. And the hemp was for textiles, making cloth, making sails, making rope. The seed was for food. And we grew tobacco to help supplement our crops on our farms. They were a cash crop that we could sell. Most of the time, we were required by our government as a farmer to grow those two crops to help support our economy. When tobacco was first discovered, it was considered medicinal. It changed to society as a whole, just like cannabis is. And there's so many similarities that we can look at them as a parallel to it. Though the tobacco farmers were systematically taken out by corporations like Philip Morris, so that the corporations could be in control of the tobacco market, and to privatize it, to use immunotherapy to make the tobacco more addictive. This is all stuff that's happening with cannabis right now. A lot of people don't realize that the tobacco companies are working with it. They're working on how to make it more addictive. They're working on how to make it more packaged, make it less. What they want is to make it stronger, just like a cigarette, where you feel it immediately, and then within 15 minutes, those effects wear off. So you're going to want another cigarette, another joint. So they're trying to do the same thing to cannabis, and they're doing it. I've seen this happening.
Well, and can I cut you off for a second? Because I know a bunch of good friends that I have are like Native Americans, and they use tobacco ceremonially. And
I grow my own tobacco, and it is completely different than what you get from the store. It'll change your life.
Exactly. It's not sprayed with a ton of chemicals and infused. I don't know how they get all those chemicals in there, but like a pack of cigarettes you would get from Marlboro is not the same as the tobacco you would grow at home. Maybe.
And like even a lot of tobacco in that Marlboro cigarette has like 20% of that tobacco has been on the floor of those tobacco plants and then just recycled back into your cigarette. And that is standard operating procedure for every tobacco company that makes cigarettes. It's just the appalling health standards in the tobacco industry itself are what leads to problems, let alone the abuse of tobacco that leads to cancer. So it blows me away, the similarities of what's going on with cannabis mom and pop growers right now. It's the exact same what capitalism did to tobacco farmers, and it's almost step by step exactly what they did. And if we look back on this, we can see it, and we can prepare for it. But I don't have the money to fight these people. Very few of us do. We got to show up at these courthouses when the time is right, and that's another whole challenge in of itself. They make it very difficult to look behind closed doors that are open for you to go and voice your opinion at the right time. It's that old not thinking very well tonight. It's they leave the papers in the town hall for you to find, but they're in the basement in a back corner with broken light bulbs. They're there for you to find, but can you really find them unless you know exactly where they are, kind of a thing?
No,
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Thank you. So it's like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy situation.
Douglas Adams.
They claim we know the situation and that it's been available for us to know of for years, but they don't make the situation easily known.
In some states where I see journalists trying to file FOIA requests aren't getting any information back from the states, and things like that. I've also seen, like in Oklahoma, I interviewed a lawyer named Ron Durbin, and Ron told me they had shut down public meetings, so they weren't letting people in, which is
And that in of itself is goes against our Constitution. How are these people getting away with it? How are we not filing injunctions against them for doing such things? How is this all okay? The system's been organized against us for so long, and now we finally get to see it. And they're using that same system to steal from our families, to fill their coffers, and to consolidate these farms.
Yeah, which has already been done for so long through the civil asset forfeiture piece, really, which is something
it happens in every single agricultural industry across the globe. All my friends think they're going to be rich being farmers, but show me a rich farmer anywhere in the world. It's a pretty rare thing. It's usually the farmer that owns 20 farms and everybody else is doing the work for
him. Bill Gates. Or
exactly. Yeah, it's people on that level, people that, people that owned a lot of land, and that's their business, is to own land, not to work it, but to own it for other people to work. And that's the business model for agriculture.
Here, let me do another shameless slap here. Charles Stockstill, the old man of the mountain. I want to ask you something that's really important. I think we talk about, aside from that, which is a massive piece of this, is the land ownership in this country. But I want to ask you about doing events. That's how I sort of linked up with you on social media. I saw you doing these events. And one of the things we talked about on the phone was also public consumption, which I see like in New York, right? In New York, you can smoke a joint anywhere someone's smoking a cigarette or something like that. In Vermont, there's no public consumption, but the crossover of events and public consumption seems like something that's would be super cool.
No, they seem to go hand in hand quite often.
Yeah, go ahead.
Any kind of events, it almost has to be a public event, just in legality, so that you're not, being exclusive or anything along those lines. And then when you hold a private event, laws change. What you can and can't do, how you're protected, whether or not you have to have your own security, so on and so forth. These events, I've always been an event whore. I love going to trade shows, whether they're boat shows, recreational hunting, cannabis, whatever. I grew up that way. My dad was a fundraiser for the Elk Foundation, the Turkey Foundation. He raised like $11 million in my lifetime to help wildlife. And so I got to see him do all these fundraising banquets around the country, how they operated, go to all these different wildlife events where, they'd have all these different safaris from all over the world, or different expos on hunting gear, just stuff like that. And when I became an adult, I worked for a Schwann's type company that sold like meat, ice cream, that kind of thing on a membership. And same thing, we worked trade shows all the time. So coming into this was a pretty natural transition for me. When I became a Ganjier and went through that whole cannabis sommelier program, I said, well, I want to be involved in these trade shows like I have been, but I want to find a way for people to come to me. So I'm not trying to find all my friends all day. I want to just, have one really cool spot to hang out at my booth, and that's where everybody's going to want to be. So talked with Kevin Jodry and Mike and Steve at Upstate Gardens up here, because I'm trying to figure out my game plan, how I'm going to involve myself in the community these days. And then we came up with this tasting bar that y'all have seen all over the place, the hashish tasting experience, as we call it, because dab bar just does not do it justice. We're not a dab bar by any way, shape, or form. We've got dabs, but that's not what people want when they get over there. We're known for old school hash, full melt hash, crazy terpene drinks, and doing pairings and infusions and meeting the energy you bring to the bar. If you come there crying, we're going to ask what's bothering you. If you come there celebrating, we're going to help you celebrate. If you were searching out knowledge, we're going to impart as much as we can on you. If you're just there to relax and unwind, let's get you 4 drinks and make that happen right away. That's what it's about.
Man,
Just networking with people.
I got this. This is
Yep.
terrible. I should have just pulled this up before,
No.
but you get this beautiful looking bar.
So we've got
Yeah,
4 tasting stations on there that's sponsored by Zenco Multi-Use Vaporizer. I reached out to them because I thought they were cool. They had like sommelier drinking glass for smoke, and I was just like, yeah, I need that. I want to try it out, and then built this whole custom thing around it, and they've just been awesome. Paul and Wendy are amazing people. They're really nice. They've helped me change my life and support my family. I don't know many people that I've ran into throughout my life that'll help people like that. And it's neat. But that was the whole reason I invented this thing, because I got tired of going to all these events and trying to find everybody and only really connecting with about 20% of the people that I wanted to connect with that day, because we were all moving around, or they were working and couldn't get away. So I figured if I was there all day with the coolest spot to hang out, everybody was going to come by, and sure enough, they do. We started this back in March, basically, with this tasting bar. I had like one tray and one Zenco before that. I was kind of testing the waters with, and it is blown up. We've now doing like 10 to 15 parties a month, all through the East Coast. We get invited to like Georgia, over by on the other side of the ocean, not our Georgia, the other Georgia, and
oh shit.
Yeah. I think I'm going to Barcelona in March for Spannabis with this bar. It's taken me all over the place, and it's starting to help other families as well. I didn't start this with the idea that this was going to be a franchise. I started this with the idea of I wanted a place for people to come hang out while I was at events, because I'm going to be there anyway. And then it's turned into this crazy franchise, and it's actually helping push the message forward of hashishans and breaking down the stigma of who we are as a culture. And it's, I'll do anything between trap parties and parties for doctors at Harvard, and I have fun at all of them. There's different aspects to each one. Every party quote unquote pays differently. It's not always money. Sometimes it's connections. Sometimes it's the experience. Sometimes it's the band that was there. Sometimes it's that you saw like 20 of your friends come through that day, and we all got to hang out and just have like the best time. I don't often make a whole bunch of money at the situation. It's great when I do, but more often than not, it's about the experience of pushing forward whatever we can do as a community and just getting ourselves out there. And if I can change some other families' lives along the way, that's pretty dang cool. And if I can feed other children besides my own, let's just keep building this table longer, man. That's what it's about. I want to share all the blessings that I can create, and I love cannabis. It's if you just take care of it, it's so easy to grow. I guess it's just because I have a green thumb, or maybe I grew up as a subsistence farmer with my family, and we didn't have a lot of money, so we had to grow to eat if we wanted to eat anything good, and then have money for other things rather than spend it all on food. So, same with cannabis. Cannabis used to be fucking expensive, like $6,000 a pound, $50 an eighth, and there's still some places it's $50 an eighth. I feel so sorry for you guys. There's places in Massachusetts and Maine right now that are selling it for $10 an eighth. It's absolutely insane. It sucks if you're a grower, but if you're a consumer, it's a great time for y'all to be alive, because you can really afford your medicine as much as you need. Back when I was a teenager, I was smoking brickweed at $30 an ounce if I could find that good of a deal. And that was the only thing I could smoke all the time and be happy from, because I couldn't afford like a $30 gram of the kind bud from Canada, and let alone smoke that all the time. So it's be grateful for what you have, because nothing stays the same. And there's still people out there that are worse off than you with your cannabis situation, no matter what it is.
I've had the brickweed.
I missed the brickweed, man. The body high off it was so good, but that was probably all the pesticides.
So let's transition to another shameless slap here. Charles Stockstill. Yeah, sorry, I did a Freudian slip there. Charles
No, that's all right.
Stockstill. I want to ask you. I've been talking to a lot of labs around the country. We've been talking about THC inflation, potency inflation, things of that nature, and some weird pesticide, lab shopping. I don't know if you have any take on that, but
Yeah. This is
you know,
something that strikes near and dear to me. Just because as a commercial consultant, whenever I'm growing my own cannabis and I'm going out to get it tested, I want the most accurate and trustable results that I can get. And if I'm using any kind of shady ways to achieve those results, why would anybody be working with me? You've got the shady labs, you've got the shady operators that mess up their samples before they get to the labs. You can spray your weed with distillate, you can spray your weed with terpenes, you can adjust it any way you want, up or down. Those ways have been out there since the 90s. We called it Pretendaberry back then, where we would, put like orange peels of strawberries in with our weed for 2-3 weeks to give it that smell, and then take it out of the bag before you got there. This was pretty common practice back in the day. Don't know how many people realize that. There was really good weed out there, but there was also shady operators, just like there is today. There's an ass for every seat. As far as the labs, some of them aren't always exactly as shady as we think they to be. Why that is because the technology that they use to test THC with, it's called a spectrometer. Basically, you've got this huge, somebody explained it to me this way. I'm going to try to use this metaphor to help everybody listening. There's a big river of information. You think of that river just as like a liquid river. It's got water running through it. You're going to take that river and you're going to drop amounts of THC, CBD, plant material in this river. And then downriver, after doing all the correct math, you're going to know the dilution of the THC in that plant that you put in that river. So what that means is you've ground up your plant, you've diluted it, you put it in your testing solution, you've divided it by 1,000 times, you've moved your decimal point down to get your solution down 1,000 times weaker than you started. Now you're putting it in the spectrometer. Have you measured everything specifically as closely as you can? Have you gone down to what kind of chemist are you? How accurate are your measurements? How accurately are you watching your surface tension? How accurate are you watching your mils, your milliliters? How good your math? It all boils down to this in your spectrometry system before you even put it in there. So you've divided your plant material, you've divided your testing material, and you're about to put it in the machine. Before it ever got there, you could have messed up with how much you've measured out in your milliliters. You could have messed up on how much dilution you put in there. You could have been, there's a lot of human error that goes in the, about this 20-step process that goes into getting your testing material ready before it even goes into the testing machine. Your testing machine has to be calibrated properly on a regular freaking basis. Your probes have to be taken care of on a regular freaking basis, just like your parts per million probes for your grows. But these are on a whole different level of sensitivity. If you're not extremely careful with your cleaning materials, your cleaning solution, how you prepare your clean room, how you prepare everything that goes into this, how you take care of your equipment, it can throw off your human error anywhere from, let's say, I want to say what they were telling me is 1 to 5%. This is standard human error at any lab. Now, 1 to 5% in either direction on a THC test is a big fucking deal. On a CBT test, that's a big fucking deal. On a metals test, that's a big fucking deal. If you're off 1 to 5%, that's the difference between passing and failing. So we're leaving our livelihoods, our farms, our families in the hands of these chemists that may or not be good at their job that day, that week. They may have an argument with their family. whatever. This is all human error going in before the machines even tested it. Now you get rid of all that. You got rid of all your human error. You got your machine. Not all these machines are the same. Not all their sensitivities are the same. So there you have a variance of error again in the machines. You add these two things together. How can we depend on these labs? And these labs know this. These chemists know this. I've talked to them about it. And if you talk to them about it in this way, it's not something they want to talk about. It's a big hush thing because there's no standard into this. Hey, what's up, Tara?
I want to drop a comment. Yeah, Tara, thanks for tuning in here. Yo, Charles, let's try the phone.
So if there's no standard in the industry, how are these tests standardized?
Well, and I've also talked to labs that told me that their SOPs are covered by trade secrets. So if you have trade secret, SOPs, how are we supposed to standardize it? Which is
and that's another reason we need this thing deschedulized so that we can get some sort of government oversight. That we have no government oversight in this program. And it's all done by individual organizations with their own agendas. Case in point, a lot of what you've had to deal with in Vermont with the people on your cannabis board. We've had to deal with that in Maine. We had to deal with that in Colorado. Don't get me started on fucking Florida and how their whole system is organized and licenses. It sounds like it might finally be getting better. I could really have my fingers crossed for them. And then what they're trying to do, Ohio, same kind of thing. Just it's so shady.
I saw that shit in Ohio where they voted on some shit and then the government was like, actually, we didn't like the way you voted, so we're gonna change. What's the point of having a vote if you're just?
We did the same thing in Colorado. We snuck it in on the 2006 ballot without them even realizing it was there, and then by the time they realized it was there, it already passed and too late. And they tried to back end it, and we fought it and we kept it. But it's interesting watching Ohio go through the same thing.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how that's gonna play out.
I keep pretty updated on all these states' laws, not only just out of self-interest as a hobby, but now that I'm starting to have these different tasting bars set up in these states, I need to be aware of what's going on for public consumption. That was something else you had talked about. There's not many states really tackling that issue yet. It's a huge gray area, and I love being in gray areas because it gives you a chance to set precedent and do it the right way and show people an example of how it can be done and be done correctly. We've been lucky enough to do some of the first consumption events in Massachusetts with like the Boston Beer Company, and these were like put in newspapers and stuff before this was ever even really a thing that people were doing out and about. Frenchy Cannoli was doing public consumption events in Boston before I even got here. I didn't know this, but I've been talking to other people around. We as trailblazers don't often forget there are other trailblazers that were here before us that enabled us to do what we're doing now. And it's super freaking cool to see where this is going right now, because up at most states right now, you can't use any public use. You can't be out at a park. You can't be anywhere other than on your property or in your backyard or in your house. Definitely can't be in national forest anywhere. Can't be on any kind of BLM land or anything that's federally owned, because it's still Schedule 1 and they could come at you with everything if they wanted. They almost never do anymore. There's still some people out there getting totally reamed by these archaic laws, but it is changing in the right direction, I think, because of organizations out there fighting for us. With New York, it's really interesting because if you can smoke cigarettes there, you can smoke cannabis. So if you have a private club that you're allowed to smoke cigars in, you can smoke cannabis in there. And so there's a lot of private events popping up that way, because you have a social club that has a private membership that has something you have to sign, a disclosure form, just to be a part of. And that makes it all legal, and it makes it okay. It makes everybody check their I's and dot their T's, Then there's also other events like the 420 event where it's in Washington Park and it's just a free fall. It's like tolerance has a time limit. You're allowed to do what you want to do for a certain amount of time, and that's okay, but you can't do it the rest of the time.
That's in my notes, Charles, is this Washington Park something. You mentioned that on the phone too, and I'd be curious to hear what happened there.
Oh yeah, so Washington Park was one of those incidences where I wanted to see what I could get away with. That's been a driving force in most of my life. What can I get away with? Whether I was in the military, public, whatever, it's just what can I do that most people aren't going to know they can do. And so
All right.
we bring this entire tasting bar and all of our hash down to Washington Park, and we set up for what ended up being like 37,000 people that day for 420. I had no idea. I'd been to different 420 parks like that in Colorado, Texas, California, that kind of thing. Those are always a lot of good time. Never been to one in New York City before. We set up front and center. We got there like 7:30 in the morning, got the best freaking spot we could, right as you're going through the arch in Washington Park. Nobody bothered us until about 2:30, 3 o'clock, and I went to the vehicle to go get something. I came back, and the NYPD was there bothering one of my friends, another Ganjier, who was setting up his own franchise and learning how to do things on this trip. So, he's like, "All right, Charles, the cops are here." I'm like, "All right, let's go. I'm ready. I'm ready for this." I walk right over there, and he's about the same size I am. He's 6.5 feet tall, pretty physically fit, and we look each other dead in the eye, and I put my hand out. Very friendly. My name is Charles Stockstill. I'm a certified Ganjier. How are you doing? He kind of looks at me like that a little bit, and he shakes my hand. I'm like, I'm out here doing education on cannabis. And I go through this whole spiel of what cannabis is, how it helps people, what we've been talking about this whole last hour and a half. I go into it just as smooth as butter. I couldn't do it now. I couldn't do it again. But that time I was able to do it. And I turned this police officer around to the point where he was actually interested in cannabis, and he was asking us questions about it and how it could help people. And his body language completely changed. He went from attack mode to interesting mode, and he was curious. And after about 5 minutes of that interaction, he was done with us, and he went to go bother other people and that were selling clones or plants or whatnot. Anything that he could go do. He was just, he told me if I start busting you or anybody else, everybody's going to be on my ass today. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right about that. And I'm actually pretty well educated, and we got into that. And, he was like, all right, I'm going to go. He basically said, I'm going to keep messing with people, but you ain't the one, kind of a thing. Yeah. And about 5 minutes later, the Parks Department came through and did this exact same thing. And, there's this real short lady, and she tried to, hassle me and hassle the company. And I'm like, no, the NYPD was here. We just went through this whole same thing. I'm here doing education, and this, that, and the other thing. And, turn her around. She's like, all right, I really appreciate you being so kind and calm about it, because everyone out here was being kind of crazy. We weren't expecting this today. We are totally overwhelmed, and I really appreciate you taking your time out to explain what's going on. And then she went and hassled somebody else too.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be nice if they just stopped hassling everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one point they had on me is some people did have permits to be there, but they didn't have any kind of proper way for people to buy these permits. So it was just a fucking free fall. It was the Wild West. So they could have arrested people for not having permits, and they would have been in the right. But they didn't do that to anybody that day. All they did was make a couple people close up, and all those people did was close up for like 10 minutes and then reopen. That was really all the worst of where anybody was that day. So things are getting better. 5-10 years ago, it may not have been like that. They may have just took me right in. And all this being said, there was quite a bit of hashish on the table in front of both of these officers, and I don't think they had any idea what it was, or they didn't care, one or the other. But it just looked like a big chunk of dog poop laying there. So I can't imagine what they thought. All they just saw were all these devices and Frenchy cannoli mood mats everywhere.
Cops love dog shit. You should have sold it to them. Look, I'm getting towards the end here, Charles. I want to thank you again, and I want to do another just quick shameless slap. Charles Stockstill. I still that's like tongue twister. I don't know why I have a trouble pronouncing that, but Thank you so much for your time. Did we get the details on the Ganjier program? I know you mentioned that, but I was curious if maybe you could tell us the details on that, because I don't think we got into that. Did we?
So I found out the Ganjier program again because of Frenchy Cannoli. I've always been a big follower of his, and it was on his page the day he passed away. Found out the horrible news in July of a few years ago. That's hard for me to talk about, being a widow. Anyway, found out about the Ganjier program the day he passed away, and found out that was the last place I was going to get the chance to receive his knowledge. So I, found out Ganjier had already full up for the year, and it was their first year they were available. Nobody really knew who they were at this point, and I didn't know any of the other instructors. I'd heard of Kevin Jodrey a little bit. Just seen him on different future cannabis projects.
I talked to Kevin a little bit. Yeah, he said he was going to come on the show too. I like Kevin.
Kevin's he is a smart fellow, dude. And if he gives you the time to listen to anything he has to say, I really haven't found anything he said to be wrong yet. And that's hard to say about just about anybody. He's a pretty honest fellow, and he knows his shit. But I got to meet him through all this, and found the Ganjier program. They were full. I wrote them every day for 2 weeks, like I was some sort of kung fu Buddhist waiting at the bottom of the mountain, waiting to get in, just shivering out in the cold, and I wrote them every day, sometimes twice a day. I finally got a letter back saying that somebody had dropped out and they were going to give me a spot that year. So I got in like October of the first year for Ganjier, and just super excited, and just being involved as a student, my cultivation career started to escalate extremely rapidly. Like I felt like Bane in Batman. I'd always been growing cannabis, but nobody knew who I was until I put the Ganjier mask on, and that's when everybody started to pay attention. And I hit pretty hard on Blueberry Express. That was one strain I created back in the early 2000s. I hit coast to coast, border to border, and that was my first taste. But the Ganjier really just lit it up for me. And so through this process of going through the Ganjier program, it's like 40 hours online. Then you do a weekend of in-person training to how you do customer service and become, the sommelier of cannabis, I guess, as it is. And then you do another weekend of the exam, or you can do all that in 1 week if you desire. And I was all the way out here on the East Coast, and I couldn't really afford 2 trips at 2 separate times to go out there, so I did it all at once. Go out there like December. We're coming up on almost my 2-year anniversary, like just 1 or 2 days from now, of being a certified Ganjier. So I'm pretty excited about that. It really did make a huge impact on my life. It made me pay attention to quality, not just in cannabis, but in every aspect of my life that I never really paid attention to before. I was always kind of a redneck cowboy military guy, and I wasn't really paying attention to the finer things in life, as it were. I was more proud of being able to eat dirt, wear leaves, and in the woods kind of fella. I knew how dirt tasted. I could tell you the nuances of that. So, it really, I started eating better because of Ganjier. I started having better meals. I started smoking better tobacco. My cannabis quality became more prevalent and not as few and far between. I even as just like whether or not the differences between a generic soda and a real Pepsi, I never noticed those kinds of things before. And so this kind of opened up a whole new life for me, just paying attention to quality and identifying quality. And I did not see that coming through a cannabis sommelier certification program, how much that it would affect me. And I feel like I've been kind of waking up in my adult life, because now I'm like 13 years sober off of the amphetamines. I've gotten through the PTSD of losing my wife, having my child removed by the government. Just a lot of bullshit we all have to deal with. We all have stories. All of us have just really interesting stuff that's made us who we are. And I feel like I'm waking up and figuring out who I am in the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm absolutely enthralled by it. It's helping me. It's helping my family. It's helping my daughter. I feel like I'm breaking some generational traumas and healing ancestral stuff that I never even thought about or was aware of. And it's mind blowing to think that, once upon a time I was the mushroom man for Burning Man, but I knew not what that was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was healing. I didn't know who I was healing or how I was healing myself. And now realize this years later blows my mind, buddy. It's just, I'm loving it. I'm enjoying life. I'm enjoying being a father. I'm enjoying being a cultivator again. I have a spark back in my eye, and it's all thanks to the wonderful people that were involved with this program that have helped me push myself. It's thanks to all the haters in my life that have been really hard on the Ganjier program, saying that it's bullshit. Everybody's pushed me to some further extent, and I absolutely thank every single one of you for it. The lovers and the haters, I couldn't have done it without you guys. Like, thank you so much. It's been beautiful. Ganjier ain't perfect, the certification company. Every company's got their flaws, whether it's Trichome Institute, Harvard's, Colorado State University, every education company's got problems, every single one. But I truly believe in the education that Ganjier offers. I believe in the standard that they're bringing to the community and to identify quality. If we can all get on the same page and identify quality together, that's going to be one of the first steps we have in unifying against this corporate front, because we can all start to agree. It doesn't. We don't have to agree about Ganjier. All we got to do is agree about quality, man. That's all it is. All we got to do is agree. All right, this mimosa is fire, or this mimosa is boof. We all know what it is. We just have to have the right way to explain it to each other, so we're all on the same page, and get rid of all this bro science that's really driving us apart. And we have so many enemies in this world against the small craft cannabis grower that we really need to get together and just make a difference and love each other, make it happen, and love these corporate shills that are involved in this, get involved with their lives and their gigs and teach them why they're doing what they're doing wrong, because they don't know yet. Or maybe they do, but I have a feeling that they just haven't gotten there yet and figured things out. Maybe they will. So let's help them. What else are we gonna do?
I'd love to help them. Get them in for a show. I'd love to talk to Boris Jordan tomorrow.
And being an MSO, I don't hold that against people at all. All of us as cultivators, whether we grow peas or cannabis, we would love to make it like that one day and have not only our farm, but several other farms with our name on them, and just giving our quality out to the people. I think that's what a lot of people would really enjoy. But when people get so big, it invites criticism, and who knows what can happen with the criticism that you will receive when you make it.
I don't think I'm ever going to be as big as Cureleaf, but I'm hoping one day, we'll get there. Charles, look, I'm out of shit. I want to do another shameless slap here. Charles Stockstill, the old man of the mountain.
Another fine print. I certainly appreciate your time, Caleb. It's been pretty fun. I was looking forward to having challenging conversations with you today. Those are the times when I learned the most about myself. So,
and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. I always leave a little space at the end for the guest if we missed anything, or you have any shameless plugs or shout outs or events coming up you want to talk about. Now's the time.
Sure.
Thank you again for being here, Charles. Absolutely. I really appreciate it, man.
So shameless plugs have always been hard for me because I don't really do too much advertising. I do a lot of word of mouth, or I'll put stuff on social media. That's about all I do. But I do have my last event of the year coming up with Cincy Magazine in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Harvard Square. So if your parents never said you could make it to Harvard, and now's your chance. Come and visit us. Come party with all sorts of really cool people. The Cincy All-Stars are going to be there. DJ Stinney. some really cool musical guests. There's also going to be this really cool reggae artist. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I should because I listen to him all the time. So come check out some awesome tunes. Come to the hash tasting experience. You know, I'm post harvest right now, so pretty much whatever you need, we got it. So that's just how it is. Praise to all the people that, you know, helped me get here, all the giants of shoulders I'm standing on. And if there's anybody that I can help stand on my shoulders in the future, I love doing that shit. I love helping people. That's the whole reason I'm here. So if you want to reach out, learn how to grow cannabis, learn how to make hash, learn how to develop a business plan to succeed, let's do it, man. I'm all there. I'm all about helping. You know, I just do it out of the kindness of my heart. So let's go.
Charles Stockstill. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey. Remember, the devil's in the details, and the details are in the fine print.